Welcome back to the Better Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Meckling, and thanks for tuning in today. If this is your first time listening in, welcome. Now, I do recommend that you start from the first episode and listen to each one in order because the topic of conversation will flow from episode to episode. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I do want to remind you guys that I do not have any medical education and that everything I discuss is from the information I've received from various psychiatrists and psychologists, as well as mental health books I've read and various research on the internet. Now let's dive right in. Today's topic is the nervous system and its relation to your gut. So the nervous system is broken down into three key points: the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, and the enteric nervous system. Now let's break each of these down even more. So the autonomic nervous system is made up of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system controls the mobilization of the body through the release of cortisol, which is our stress hormone. Consider it the gas pedal, if you will. It's the response to a threat causing mobilization into fight or flight, as well as a safety response causing mobilization into play and excitement. Whereas the parasympathetic nervous system controls immobilization of the body through the vagal, which reduces or stops sympathetic activations, or the brake pedal, as you will. It also has a threat response that causes immobilization into collapse, or the faint response, or the freeze response, as well as a safety response causing immobilization when you rest and digest. And finally, the enteric nervous system is the intrinsic nervous system within the gastrointestinal system. Wow, talk about some big words. Also known as your second brain, because the gut produces the same neurotransmitters found in the brain. It's a bidirectional mind-body relationship. Now, within the enteric nervous system, you have dysbiosis, which is the digestive system imbalance, which worsens during anxiety, depression, and PTSD. That's why a calm mind helps with digestion and lowers unnecessary stress reactivity. So, if you think back to our fight, flight, and freeze responses, there's actually 6 different phases you can go through with the autonomic nervous system. The first stage is fight, then flight. Next is freeze, then fright, next is flag, and finally faint. Now, let's break these down a little bit. Freeze, the first phase, is an orienting reflex from the sympathetic nervous system, whereas the flight phase is mobilization toward escape, as we've discussed before, and this is also from the sympathetic nervous system. Then we have the flight phase, which is mobilization toward protection from the sympathetic nervous system, followed by the fright phase, which is a dual autonomic activation caused from the abrupt alternations between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems, leading to panic, dizziness, and nausea. Oh boy. Next, we have the flag phase, which in the parasympathetic nervous system causes the blood pressure to drop, collapse, helplessness, loss of speech, loss of vision, and numbness. And finally, the faint response, which is in the parasympathetic nervous system, which causes vasovagal syncope, nausea, loss of bowel control, vomiting, and fainting. Wow, that was a lot of information. Who knew our nervous systems were so complex? This is why we usually feel our feelings in our gut. Now today, I'm going to leave you with the breath of heart technique. Sit comfortably in a chair and place your hand over your heart and invite all of your attention to gently rest there. Imagine as you begin to breathe in that you are breathing in and out of your heart. Inhale as the breath flows into your heart and exhale as the breath flows out of your heart. Repeat this 5 times. Now for the next 5 minutes, bring to mind a time in which you felt deep peace, love, or gratitude. Notice if you can connect to any of those same feelings in the here and now. Allow your mind and body to be immersed in the memory of that experience. Balancing your heart's rhythm pattern through breath practice creates a state called coherence, indicated by the increased order and harmony in the mind, emotions, and body. Now, don't forget, you can always call 988, which is the National Suicide and Crisis Prevention Hotline, if you're ever having a mental health situation and need to speak to someone immediately. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you found it helpful and educational and enjoyed it as much as I did. Don't forget to listen into our next episode, which is going to be every other Thursday, as well as my music that I have released on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. My music is listed under the name Ash, A-S-H, which is in all capital letters with an exclamation point. Also, feel free to give this podcast a follow on Instagram, X, Facebook, or Threads at Better Yourself Podcast. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. See you guys later.